And we begin. My name is Alan Dale. I'm a much loved figure within the JFK research community. And I have the distinction and the privilege of speaking with Dr. John Newman this afternoon. Could be morning for all we know. Dr. Newman is adjunct professor of political science at James Madison University, retired U.S. Army officer, a strategic intelligence cryptologic analyst, and served for 2 years as military assistant to General William Odom at the National Security Agency. And he is one of our essential guides to unraveling the complexities of our past so that we might have a better understanding of our present. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Newman.
My pleasure, Alan.
A number of decades ago now, something extraordinary happened in your life, and something that would be relevant to our studies. And that is the publication of a book, JFK and Vietnam, which was updated, revised after 25 years, republished January of 2017. And this time it includes the following among extraordinary endorsements on the back cover: a brilliant, meticulously researched and fascinating account of the decision-making which led to America's long agony in Vietnam. Mr. Newman has added to our history and hopefully our modesty as we approach the decisions of the future. William E. Colby, former director, Central Intelligence Agency. That's kind of a story unto itself, that a person of the stature, a consequential director, a period of enormous significance inside the agency, should volunteer his support of this work because he felt that, like Special Assistant President Kennedy, Arthur Schlesinger Jr., they each felt that the story of JFK in Vietnam had to date not been told with such authority, nor with such documentation. Can we go back and talk to us a little bit about your recollection of that period for you?
Well, it's a very strange path that has, like the election of JFK, requires all these things to happen around Martin Luther King and the civil rights people. If one thing doesn't happen, the next thing. You and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to each other today if my mentor, academic mentor, Dick Thornton, did not have a literary agent named John Slevin. Mm-hmm. John Slevin was actually a minor agent, dealing mostly with the Moonies. And anyway, he was in Texas doing a book deal with a burglar who was writing a book. He was out of jail, writing a book about how to protect yourself against burglary. And so he met a young lady in a bar down in Dallas, Texas, and they were having a drink and talking, and he asked her what she was doing. She said, well, I'm Jane Rusconi. I'm Oliver Stone's, chief head of research or something like that. What do you do? And he said, oh, I'm working for somebody that knows John, and he's told me a lot about him. And it just so happens that he's just a few months away from defending his dissertation and publishing his book on JFK and Vietnam. And she said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, in fact, his thesis is that JFK was getting out. And she said, well, yeah, well, that's what Oliver Stone's doing. Well, so I got a call. I was out at Fort Leavenworth at the Command and Staff College, and I got a phone call. It was Stone. And so it's just north, 1 hour plane ride down to Dallas, where they were shooting most of the films. And so I flew out there first, though. I flew to Hollywood, where we set the parameters. No need to go over those now, but what happened afterwards is that he liked it so much that a lot of the material, 10 scenes, actually were in the movie. So I would have to fly down from Leavenworth on the weekends when I wasn't actually working in my class of other people. But so that all happened in the fall of 1992. And Also at that time, the Army gave its pre-publication approval for JFK and Vietnam, very important. And then as we move to the key point, which is in December, you have, I defended my dissertation with honors at GW. And at the same time, the National Security Agency tries to suppress my book. I'd already given a copy of it, oh gosh, a year earlier, and they didn't even want it because, you know, you have to go through the Army. And it's a good thing I did. But so I was very, very worried. My wife was very, very worried. My parents were worried at the time. What was going to happen if I didn't obey? And so Stone sent Frank Makowitz out to babysit me, and he came out 3 or 4 times, and we would meet off-site, not in NSA, but at a nearby motel. And he said, you ought to just stick it out. He said, they're just afraid of the impact that your book and that film is going to have. And so I did. And I went out to for the premiere to Hollywood. And so the morning of the press junket at 4 a.m. their time, and this is on a Saturday, you know, so people aren't really usually working in NSA on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock, which is the time difference. But he woke me up out of bed, and I said, hello, and he said, is this Major Newman? And I said, well, yes, it is. And he said, this is the National Security Agency. Your book is good to go. Have a good day. Click. And it was really obvious after a while, because if you don't understand what a press junket is, I was one of the 6 people that was actually being interviewed by the press, and we would switch tables. So a press junket goes on for a couple of hours. 12 guys or women, or men and women reporters are at your table, then 20 minutes later, another 12 come in, and so on. This keeps going on and on. They did not want me telling the entire press corps that they were trying to suppress my book.
Right.
So I did have a good day, as it turned out. But anyway, that's how it happened. But it didn't end there. It did not end there, because another plot was hatched where Random House, which got a lot of money, and I think somebody addressed that yesterday in our all the money that was collected from different places to blunt the effect of my book in the film. So anyway, Random House got a hold of 3 people. Really, let me see here. I need to use this. So Norman Mailer to do the Oswald part of the story, Gerald Posner to do Case Closed, and then Gus Russo to do, the reason they picked him was because he was on our side. He was on the conspiracy side of the equation.
For a while, yeah. But
now you have a conspiracy guy who got reeled and realized he'd been wrong. But they didn't like his book, so it didn't get published for years. But Norman Mailer's Oswald's Tale and Posner's Case Closed came out. And so it was the combination of that. Actually, so you have Random House asking Warner Books to suppress my book, and they did as a favor. And it disappeared from, for the rest of 1990, well into 93, into the fall, when Jamie Galbraith wanted to use it. He saw that back cover that you were talking about.
After 5 months on the shelves and selling and generating enormous press attention internationally.
It was a food fight.
It's yanked.
It was yanked then, and to make a long story short here, the Galbraith family intervened. He got me my rights back.
Thank God.
And, but I didn't do very much with it until recently, when 2017 decided to redo it and put a lot more stuff in. But anyway, that's what happened there. And we wouldn't be sitting, it all started with that guy Slevin. If he doesn't get a call from a burglar down in Texas to go do a book deal and meet Jane Rusconi in the bar, we're not here talking about this.
Yeah, it's astounding. It's astounding.
And many other things, as you know, Dick Thornton and my boss, General Odom, and all those things had to happen too. So
serendipity.
We'll be here in this conversation for the next 2 hours if we all stuff like that. So JFK and Vietnam
has the impact that it has. It gets yanked from the publisher, which was Time Warner. There's the intervention by a distinguished American family on your behalf, during which time you're not just sitting around, you're deeply immersed in the newly released documents that come as the result of the 1992 President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act, the result of which is your next book, which is called it's called Oswald and the CIA. So that's 1995. Around that period, you're introduced to our dear colleague and the great figure Malcolm Blunt, and which was actually in around Dallas somewhere, as near as I can determine. You guys met at a book signing in Dallas or surrounding area, at which point, somewhere around there, you develop a familiarity. You're introduced to Deborah Conway, and you become introduced to JFK Lancer. 4 years after that, your presentation at the Lancer Conference in 1999 is called Mexico City, A New Interpretation. Do we want to touch upon the complexities of where you were in 1999 that were important about Mexico City?
Yeah, let's. Well, we're going to be getting to that, some of that anyway, and some of the other questions that you're going to give to me today. But I'll just say this: that was probably the first time, but that it was a series of them. It wasn't just there. I do have copies, not of my exact presentation there, but I've gone back and looked at what happened. Was I kept honing that over and over again. The Lancer Conference, the WEC conferences, the AARC conference, the Spy Museum debate, Congressman Stokes and me against Max Holland and the reporter George Lardner.
Right.
Documentary. And so it for a number of years, but Mexico City and its importance in the assassination of President Kennedy and the cover-up that followed was something I stuck to, and kept working and kept working. And I think it's quite effective. So that was the reason why I decided to do a second edition to Oswald and the CIA, not because of what Malcolm wanted me to do, was just to redo the whole book.
Yeah.
But this was a new piece because at the end of that process that began back in Lancer in 99, I ended up fingering Angleton as the person who really masterminded the documents piece of this, the suppression of all the documents that showed that Oswald had gone to Mexico City and other places, New Orleans, all that was missing. And like a virus was suppressed until the day Kennedy was shot. And then all of a sudden it balloons up. Yeah. And so I wrote a whole new chapter about that in 2008.
Published in 2008, but really the period we're addressing is 1999 through 2007.
Yeah, but it was published in 2008.
Right, culminates with the revised edition of Oswald and the CIA. What happened? What were you doing from that point, now that you've revised the work that was set in motion almost immediately after you began dealing with the problems with the publisher with JFK and Vietnam? By 2007, you're finished with the revision. 2008, it's published. What did you do between 2008 and which you got back?
No, it was really, I was done in late 2006, early 2007. That's when I turned in the manuscript, okay?
Oh, I see.
To a publishing house I wish I hadn't. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I was not happy with having started back in 1992 with JFK and Vietnam, but really with the Oswald and Assassination by 95. And I just didn't think, I thought we were spinning our wheels. Too much attention on Dealey Plaza and not enough on the documents that have been released and all that sort of thing. So I said, I'm kind of burned out here. I need some time off. And so I took a vacation for 6 years, from 2007 all the way up to 2011, when it finally got published, which was Quest for the Kingdom, The Secret Teachings of Jesus in the Light of Yogic Mysticism.
That's quite a vacation.
That for 4 years, I had to understand Judaism, early Christianity, and all this. early arcane yogic mysticism at the same time. And
Yeah.
it taught me a lot of things. Some of the things that you might be asking me about today in these interviews, which is, what did I learn from being in army intelligence or military intelligence? Well, some of the same things that book taught me, because I had to let go of the manuscript several times. There was too much me in it and not enough just taking the ride and seeing where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And it also taught me that there's a lot of argument going on, has been for just centuries and centuries, over what Jesus said and all that. And it became clear to me that we would know nothing about the true historical Jesus if it weren't for the Jesus Seminar, which came up with the same exact process that we should all be using in police work and intelligence work, which I know about, which is you need more than one source to give a high rating for something. And so they call it, independent attestation. And if you get double independent attestation, that's pretty good. Well, triple independent or multiple independent attestation that's where you really know that you're dealing with something. And that's a lesson that I brought with me to the next phase, which was, what happened after that. I got a call from an independent film producer in Pennsylvania who was doing a book or doing research, and we hooked up for a while. And strangely enough, my wife Sue liked it, and who she didn't like all the time I was spending before in the case. Now all of a sudden she changed her mind, and so I thought about it, and I said, you know what? Maybe you ought not to advise me to do that, because I'm not writing just a book. A book isn't going to do anything. We need to go back to the drawing board and start all over again. And she said, no, I don't mind. I said, okay, well, that's it. I'm all in or we're all out. I'm not going to, I don't know how many years it's going to take, how many books it's going to take, but that's what happened after the Quest for the Kingdom. I had to reach a decision point whether to come back or not to come back to the case.
So one of the questions is, if not for the fact that you were contacted by this person who was engaged in research for a project with which you were not affiliated, if not for that, you may not have had reason to have the particular conversation you had with Sue, your wife, which was extremely consequential for you because it really set us in motion through this process of multiple volumes on President Kennedy's life, his period of public service, the facts, and...
Well, the film producer actually came to our house and lived with us for a couple of days, and she and Sue got to know each other very well.
Oh.
So that,
didn't know that.
she was working on me because I hadn't made up my mind yet. Because I remember what I went through and what all the food fights and all the arguments and all the, ad hominem going on. I mean, we had really bad stuff going on, especially on the forensics and all that stuff. Just awful.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know. But anyway, if it hadn't been for that trip and the friendship between this film producer and my wife, I don't think that we wouldn't be here right now again.
That's probably true, although I think people who know you well and are immersed in the work that you have contributed might suggest that something else would have eaten at you and that you would have found a way back.
No, the universe has its, call it dharma. It's your path.
Yeah.
You can't fight it. Eventually it shows itself to you, and if you fight your dharma, you're probably not going to do as well in life. So you might as well just accept it. I agree with that analysis. One way or another, I think maybe I would have ended it back on the case. But it was pretty quick.
We are, well,
after Quest for the Kingdom.
Well, speaking of quick, I mean, it is astonishing to me that during the particular period during which I've had opportunities and privileges to participate in some aspects of the work that you're producing, we've gone from Quest for the Kingdom to Where Angels Tread Lightly, which was volume 1, through volume 2, through the publication not only of volume 3, Into the Storm, but also concomitant to that, we've got the republishing of a second edition of the book that we started, that we spoke about initially, JFK and Vietnam. All of that is in January 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are deeply immersed in at least one stream, possibly more than that, depending upon what you would choose to address right now. But we're deeply immersed in volume 4. It is worth noting, and it need not go without saying, that this is a work in progress, that people who are interested in taking the ride will benefit from availing themselves of the works that are already available. Because there is more than a thread that connects your entry point with Angels Tread Lightly, where that's volume 1 through volume 3, and maybe I would honestly be tempted to say most essentially of all, from my perspective, the choice, serious choice that you made 25 years later to go back with better educated eyes and revise and reevaluate and supplement JFK and Vietnam for a second edition. If there's a companion piece to your life's work, my position at the moment, and it could change, I'm fairly flexible about certain things. I think that JFK and Vietnam, the second edition, is the essential companion piece to how it is that we got to the final chapter of volume 3, the title of which is Intermission. So my question is, our most recent word from you in printed form is the final chapter of volume 3. You chose to title Intermission. We're deeply immersed in volume 4, which we're hopeful will be published in December of next year, about a year from now-ish. And my question seems obvious. Why did you choose Intermission, and does this represent a significant midpoint while you reassess how we got to this point and think about where we go from here in terms of...
Well, I guess I think we're skipping a piece of the process that I've gone through. Having published volume 3, what happened, and I'll talk to you about the question, the intermission at the end, but basically what that has done is taken me down 2 tracks. One is to continue this series, however long it takes, and to begin working on the Martin Luther King case. That's something that is underway. And as JFK in Vietnam is a good companion for this series, because it covers the span of the Kennedy's presidency. Well, MLK's does even more than that. It goes all the way back too. And it goes all the way down, as you know, to the assassination of MLK and RFK.
Right.
Put that on the table right away. We were going to be talking about having any preconceptions and any surprises. We can come back to that later if you want.
Whatever you would like. I mean, I already know the answer to that question. I think that you made a decision a couple of times during the course of your career as an historian and as an investigator to take everything off the table and start all over. So I don't
right. But the question that you asked me, did I have any preconceptions about where the pursuit of the case would lead?
Yeah.
And were there any surprises? And there's 2 parts to that. No, I didn't have preconceptions. Yes, there were surprises.
Right.
What I did have were operating hypotheses to examine as my work progressed. And I'll just tick off just very briefly. The first thing that came to my mind was, it seemed to me, from what I knew, that the contours of the plot that eventually took place throughout 63 and up to the assassination had already begun to fall into place in 62. I didn't really have a whole lot of things in particular because I found out a whole lot more. But that went back to the beginning, all the way back to Where Angels Tread Lightly. That operated, and it was the first one. And I'll be darned if it isn't still there in spades. And it's so that's interesting. The other thing was that the plot was designed to make it look like the Kennedy brothers planned to overthrow Castro. had been successfully turned around by Fidel and resulted in the assassination of Kennedy. That haven't changed at all. In fact, as we go through time, you find people trying to, water that stinky flower. Anyway, and then the third thing I would mention is the Mexico City part also.
Right.
So those three, I had more than that, but those three things there were really at the center of the operating hypotheses that I had. And over time, I've had to add more. But there really has been very little I've had to do to adjust those three at all. So
there's continuity.
Yeah.
But along the way, we come to this intermission.
There are surprises. There are surprises. And
reassess.
Intermission. There's a big surprise, something I hadn't really anticipated. So, and it's when I got towards the end of the book, I'd written there's a lot of stuff in that book, on the KGB CIA spy wars, all kinds of subjects, and getting rid of disinformation. But when I got to the mongoose thing, I knew about mongoose before. I know a whole hell of a lot more about the Bay of Pigs than I did about mongoose because of volume 2.
Yeah.
It hit me real fast. It didn't. Once you put all the documents out there, it was really obvious to me that Lemnitzer and Lansdale were engaged in really seditious activity. That was one big surprise right there. But there were two others. And that was a trip to the LBJ library and a trip to the Fort McNair, the National Defense School that's there, and getting into the Lemnitzer archives. So you take those two things, what I found out of Mongoose, and all of a sudden seeing what was going on with Burris and LBJ, the vice president, during those years, and then what Lemnitzer was up to with data that I had never seen before, and other people haven't either. It's really hard to get that. That said to me, pull the curtain down. We're done here. I need to do a lot more work, and I did. I worked on the Lemnitzer stuff, and in Volume 4, I've got chapters laid out, but it was a lot of work, a lot of research. And then, came a moment where I decided I wanted to see what was going on with a small piece of Martin Luther King's life. And it's now turned into a very big thing, spanning lots of years. It will probably be more than one book. We'll see when we get there. But those were the surprises. And so even the MLK thing jumped out of the, I don't know, for me, it was an earthquake. Because I was just motoring along, with my plan.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I realized I didn't know what I was talking about. I don't like to talk about something that I haven't researched, and I haven't researched in 3 ways or 4 ways. And so that's really what happened, and why there was an intermission. There was no conclusion to that book, not really.
Well, that's where we are. We're not at a conclusion that we're trying to prove. We're
That's right.
As essential new elements emerge. We're down to really about the last minute and a half or so. We're talking about completing volume 4. We're talking about 1 or possibly 2 additional projects which will focus on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Are we ultimately not finished until the period 2 months in 1968 where the 2 most prominent and most articulate and most influential opponents of America's involvement in Vietnam are both assassinated? Is that where you think we're headed?
That's why I'm going after the King story. John Kennedy is dead at the end of 1963. But the other 2 people that were very important in that equation where King put them in, and was RFK and MLK. Those were the 3 guys who changed history. And there was a great light in the world for a while. Not choosing what you were going to do for a country because of which side they were on in the Cold War internationally, and we had terrible things going on at home too. The race issue. But I think that it was a matter of time. And what it is, it's the Vietnam War, because once Kennedy's gone, the one thing he never would have done happened. And Martin Luther King and RFK, it maybe took a year or two, but neither of those two guys could go along with it. They just couldn't. And the longer it went on, the more adamant they became. And they were prepared, I think, to stop that war in its tracks.
That's what they were saying. That's what they were addressing. Done. I want to take a moment and express my gratitude to Deborah Conway, Larry Hancock, for allowing us this opportunity, and the website address for the work that is in progress. People can stay apprised depending upon what we put up. I know there are things that I'm supposed to have up there right now. The website address is jfkjmn.com. And thanks to all, and to all a good day. Thank you.